Welcome to Highly Sensitive, Happily Married, the podcast that teaches you to not only have an easier marriage as a sensitive woman, but to have one that feels more amazing by the day. Where you'll hear relatable stories, love advice that works, and coaching on how to have a marriage where feeling upset and disconnected is a thing of the past, and where instead a sense of loving connection and even fun and lightness is the norm. I'm Hannah Brooks, highly sensitive person, love expert, and marriage coach, and I'm so happy to be on this journey with you. Hello, and welcome to episode 61. Today we are going to be embarking on a little adventure. Today is going to be the first out of a few episodes related to a theme. But before we dive in to that today, I want to address and reiterate something I mentioned on the very, very first podcast episode, because occasionally I get requests from wonderful humans who are hoping that I can start using more non-binary pronouns, like saying more your partner, saying they and them instead of him and her. And I just wanted to reiterate that although I love all of you and celebrate you for whatever pronoun you use and whoever you love, I have made a very conscious decision to specialize and speak very specifically to highly sensitive heterosexual or bisexual or pansexual women about their experience of being in a relationship with or being married to a man. Because this is what I know deeply and intimately myself, and these are the people who I am best positioned to help. And if that is not you, this podcast, of course, will still have so much to offer you, and you are absolutely welcome here. I have plenty of people who email me and say, I just switched the pronouns, but your podcast has made such a difference in my life. So feel free to do that yourself. And if you don't choose to do that, that's totally fine. And I do plan on sharing some resources for LGBTQIA folks in the future for connecting you with coaches who might specifically speak to you. All right, so let's dive into today's topic. And this morning, I was reminded of an important relationship lesson, which has to do with these episodes, this little series. So this morning, my kitten, who I've been sort of chasing for attention lately. At first, she was so like purry and cuddly and flabby and just wanted to be with me all the time. But she's gotten a little friskier and a little more aloof lately, as cats do. And I've just been like not willing to accept it, right? So I've been picking her up. I've been basically trying to manipulate her into spending more time with me. Because I mean, she's so cute, right? And this morning, I was sitting there, ignoring her basically because I was busy with something else. I was doing some studying. She climbed right over to me, up my belly, and perched on my shoulder. And she just purred with her cute little face right up next to my ear. And she promptly fell asleep. The moral of the story, right? The lesson for me was let her have her freedom, right? Let her have her freedom to be herself, to do what she does without interference. And she will feel better around me and ultimately like to be around me and ultimately be more genuinely affectionate, right? She'll come to me with eagerness when she's ready. So let's look at it a little closer, right? What was I doing that made her run from me? To put it in the most simple terms, I was trying to control her. I was trying to get her to do certain things, right? Like snuggle with me. And of course, this is what we're going to talk about today. Control. And I have to say that this can be a bit uncomfortable to face in ourselves, to look at where we might be being controlling, because being controlling is like not something we're taught to want to be. Right? And But I decided that this was really important and essential to talk about, because even if it can be uncomfortable to look at in ourselves, it's essential in having the kind of love and closeness that most of us want in our marriage, right? Looking at it and working with our desire to control. So even if you don't think you have a desire to control, or you don't think control is an issue from your end in your relationship, I want you to stay tuned and just listen in, because it shows up in surprising and subtle ways and in so many ways. And I have been talking about it in many ways already on the podcast, but we're going to go into some more, comprehensive specifics today. And I want to also say that it was at first hard for me to admit to myself that I have a tendency towards being a controlling person. Like, that's sort of my MO or was, right? But once I was able to really admit that and see that in myself, I was able to tackle the work and confront the sort of cause of it, right? The underlying reasons, and ultimately release my controlling behaviors, my control urges towards control in big ways, so that I could not only show up in my marriage in a way I feel really good about, but also so that I could make the space for the love and intimacy I really want with my husband in our marriage, right? And it has been a total game changer for me, for us. Although I have to say, I am still imperfect at it. And that's really the good news. Like, we don't have to be perfect at it. It still works by making just this awareness is a positive step in a really good direction. And then, becoming less controlling, less and less every step of the way has a positive effect on our marriages. So here, just like this kitten story, right? In a thriving relationship with a kitten or a thriving marriage as a wife, we don't want to be a boss or an authority figure, right? In other words, in a great marriage, we are not a mother to our partner, right? We are a lover instead, right? In a great marriage, we are not purposefully or unintentionally managing, manipulating, or controlling our partner in a subtle or obvious way, right? Or any way. We're not mothering our man in any sense of the word, right? In a thriving and a great marriage, we're an equal team player, right? We're a partner in crime. We are someone for our partner to love and cherish, and we're someone for him to feel loved and cherished by, right? A partner in a healthy partnership is someone to find pleasure with, someone to feel respect for and respected by, someone to have fun with. And yes, oftentimes someone to run a household and raise children with. Yeah. And obviously I don't want to minimize the importance of like the logistics of running a house and a household and raising a family and balancing that with career and all the things, right? And to do this well really means we do communicate well, and we make requests and we negotiate, and we both partners take responsibility, right? But we have to be careful here. We can't make our partner take more responsibility. So, logistical dealings are real things worthy of figuring out, but without one person managing the other. Because the glue of a successful marriage is the love, is the joy we find in each other, right? The connection between us, the respect and understanding and the genuine acceptance we develop and maintain between us, right? Really what I mean here is that rich, juicy emotional glue, right? In other words, the glue of a successful marriage is the lover part. And by lover, I don't just mean the like sexual in the bedroom kind of stuff, though of course that's a piece of it. I mean a whole host of things that I'll share a little bit later in this episode. But first, let's take a look at how you know if you've kind of treaded into mothering territory in your relationship. and sort of or totally lost sight of lover territory, right? Or you might have a combination of that going on. So here are some of the signs that you've treaded into that mothering territory with your husband. I hear this a lot from people, is that he feels like he's one of my kids. I remember I used to say that about my first husband, right? So if you ever caught yourself thinking that or feeling like he's a second kid or something, yeah, that's a good sign. And if you feel sort of the burden of that, or even like the sense of injustice of having married what you thought was an adult, but he seems to you like a child, right? Someone you need to manage and keep quote unquote responsible, right? That's a sign. That burden, right? That sense of injustice, or you just generally feel resentful, right? Or you feel like you need to take it all in quotes on, right? Like all the things, and running the house, like managing the relationship, right? Or you feel, this is a big one too, you feel a lack of respect for him, or a lack of respect and trust in his capabilities, right? His ways, his approaches to things, his opinions, right? In other words, this is a sense of not thinking and feeling like he's thinking of him and feeling as though he's your equal. Now, from his end, some signs that you might have sort of ventured into the mothering territory, he might say things like, I can't ever do anything right with you, right? Or he gets defensive really quickly. Or he sneaks or does the opposite of what you told him you want him to, like maybe behind your back or just flippantly, right? He kind of rebels, yeah? Or he may even kind of act like a teenager around you, like letting you take on things like scheduling his doctor's appointments, right? Or kind of like he's grown to depend on you for basic things he could do himself that you haven't necessarily been like, hey, I do this and you do this, right? But that just kind of like fell into this reliance on you for some of the basic things in his life. Another sign from his end is that he's always asking you your opinion about a choice he has to make. I wanted to think about it and break it down into a couple different categories of control. And I landed on this way of thinking about it for now, which is that there's this first category of kind of control or mothery energy from our end that I think of as tangibles. And these tangible things can look like, for example, like from your end, you redoing the way he put the dirty dishes in the dishwasher, right? Reorganizing them. Or like doing some project for him without him necessarily specifically asking you to. I definitely did this for my ex-husband's business website. I remember that specifically because I kind of thought I knew better and, he couldn't do it as well as me, right? Another tangible way this control can show up from your end is telling him what to wear or like how he should groom his hair and beard, facial hair, right? Or telling him when to be home. Really just basically trying to manage the things he does, right? How he interacts with the kids, what chores he gets to on the weekends, how he spends the money, what he eats. That's been a big one for me. Telling him how to talk to his mom, right? Telling him to get to work on time, right? All these things, right? Some specific examples from my current marriage is I've caught myself, I wrote an email about this recently. Our blog post is like, hey, stop drinking that many beers, right? That's been a big one I've been working on. Or like, eat healthier. Don't eat those peanut butter cups, right? And I've caught myself doing this sort of tangible controlling about how to, approach his mom about a certain topic, right? So this might sound familiar. And I'm sure many of you have found yourself doing some of these tangible controlling things. The second category is the intangibles, the sort of less tangible ways we want to control. We tend to try to control our partner. And they're oftentimes sort of more like directly sort of emotional, if that makes sense. They feel more emotional maybe. This can look like, these intangibles can look like tone policing. You know that one? Like, hey, don't talk that way to me, right? It's like managing the quality of his tone, or how well, for example, trying to manage how well he's listening to you. Like noticing where he's looking when you talk to him and trying to get him to look at you, or trying to get him to communicate that he's hearing you in a way that you like, right? Or like, in other words, kind of telling him how to talk to you, or how to listen to you, right? Or another example of an intangible way we try to control is trying to get him to talk about his feelings openly, trying to get him to have those deep talks that you love, right? Or trying not to upset him, or trying to fix his feelings. And this can oftentimes look like people pleasing too, right? There's all sorts of ways we might try to fix our partner's feelings or try to prevent him from having bad feelings, but people pleasing is a big one. And it's because that's really an attempt to make him feel certain ways, like happy with you or good about you or not upset with you, right? Other ways we do this intangible kind of controlling is we might cry or complain or blame or criticize or give the cold shoulder or demand or have some sort of reactive emotional fit, right? Yelling, accusing, to get him to understand how terrible something he does makes you feel. I've shared before how I used to go to my bedroom when my ex-husband had like some sort of conflict after, like if we couldn't resolve it, I'd just like storm up to the bedroom and I'd cry really hard. And some of that was genuine, like I was just feeling my feelings and I was just expressing them, right? But I could feel that a part of that was really a tactic to get him to feel bad and rush to my side to soothe me and tell me he'll change. Right? So a lot of us do that by these various tactics. One of mine was crying, right? But for many of us, it might be complaining or blaming or criticizing, right? All these things I've called in various episodes. I even did a whole bunch of a series on the backfiring tactics, right? So these all fall under the realm of control. They're really an attempt to manipulate our person to behave in the ways we think will make us feel better. Yes. So this first category, the tangibles, right? These feel kind of like classic mom behavior, right? You shouldn't talk to your mother like that, right? You should eat healthier, right? These sorts of things. But this second category, this intangible category, often also leads to your partner feeling duty bound, scolded, like a not up to par partner, right? Ill-equipped, maybe less evolved, right? Like he can't do anything right? Like really like an incapable person. In other words, like a kid, like who's just not got it together the way an adult would. Not really feelings we want our beloved, our lover, our adult partner to have. So if I haven't said this already, I'll say it again now. Control, right, which I sometimes call manipulation or managing other people. It's probably the number one biggest issue in our relationships, like probably the biggest problem, right? Trying to control what we cannot. Trying in so many ways and not even realizing we're doing it. Control is always a confused and backfiring tactic, right? It doesn't work for one, and it usually makes things worse, which I'll get into in a few minutes here. I mean, because feeling like your husband's mom and he's your kid, that's really the last thing most of us want to feel with our husband. Right? And when my clients see this, they inevitably say something like, ooh, gross, right? Because it's just not what we want. It's like, talk about like a sexiness lover killing approach, right? Being his mom. I think we wives, we women want a lover, not a kid for our partner. And our husbands want a lover too, and not another mother. But the thing is, and I really want you to hear this, I have so much compassion for this attempting to control our hubby, for falling into this mothering kind of role. And again, I consider myself a recovering control addict. It's really like the only way we've learned or been taught to create happiness for ourselves. Because we think it's other people's actions that cause our feelings. So when we're doing this control thing in one form or another, it's really always boiling down to it being kind of a roundabout, long route way, like the long road, to controlling our own emotions. In other words, what we're trying to do when we're controlling another person or trying to control them is we're trying to get a feeling that we want for ourselves or avoid having a feeling we don't want to have. That's really like, hear that part. What we're trying to do when we're attempting to control another human being is to create a feeling inside of ourselves or avoid having a feeling we don't want to have. Even when it comes to these very tangible things, like an example would be if you want your husband to put his shoes neatly where they belong, it's ultimately so that you don't have to feel annoyed every time you look at the shoes out of place, or you don't feel tired from always having to do it yourself, right? Or you want him to do it so that you can feel respected, so that you can believe and feel as though he loves and respects you and cares about what you want, right? So you're wanting to get yourself away from the feeling of annoyance, away from the feeling of tired, or to have the feeling of being loved and respected. But when we're trying to control his behavior, in order to get that, it's actually just a simple misunderstanding, right? Thinking that that what your husband does, that his actions and behaviors is where your feelings come from, instead of where they actually come from, which is your own thinking, your perceptions, your beliefs, and the way you filter things out there, things that happen out there, outside of you, through your own unique mind, body, heart system, right? So your brain, your nervous system, that is actually where your feelings come from. And if you don't understand this deeply, which most of us don't because it's not what we've been taught, right? Or if you haven't learned to be the steward of your own mind, body, heart system, right? Your own thinking and nervous system, you will always try to manipulate events and circumstances and people outside of yourself in an attempt to take care of your own feelings, right? It's the only way we know how to do it. If we don't know how to do so, sort of be that steward of our own selves, right? Our own feelings, our own thinking. Right? So this attempt to control what's out there, it comes from a benevolent intention, but it doesn't work. Or it might work, but it costs us so much in our marriages. Because when we think he's the source of our feelings, like what he does, how he behaves is the source of our feelings, we end up doing all those backfiring tactics and all the tangible and intangible control tactics I talked about, right? We might nag, we might boss, we'll try to control him in this way or that way. And we'll move more into this mothery place and farther away from this lover place. Now, I'm still occasionally guilty of this, right? Again, I get weird about my husband's second helping of food sometimes because I want to avoid feeling worried about his health, right? So the kind of unconscious logic is when I'm not really watching myself, my brain can go to this place where if I change his eating habits, if I get him to stop eating those second helpings, or if I get him to stop eating those peanut butter cups, right? Or do you remember the episode I was talking about the baked goods? Same thing. If I get him to stop doing those things, I won't have to feel worried about his health and that I might end up without him someday because he dies young, right? But guess what? I may be successful here and there at getting him to not have that second serving or that extra beer, right? And so I may have these moments of reprieve from my worry. But the next day, it will be the same old thing, right? And I'll have to control him again to stop eating those things. If that's the only way I know how to control my own feelings. And sometimes he will not do as I say, I promise. Or right, he'll push back. He'll feel annoyed. He'll feel micromanaged. He'll feel I see him as someone who isn't capable of making good decisions. And guess what? Then he will react childishly. He will act like a kid. He will get mad and like, and get all defensive. And even sometimes go sneak peanut butter cups in his truck. In fact, did I ever tell you how I found a pile of peanut butter cups underneath the driver's seat in my car, like the wrappers? Like a big pile. He's sneaking them, right? This is a symptom of me having tried to control his peanut butter cup habit. Right? So this approach leads to me always needed to control him. Right? But that's not reliable. So I'm left with no power over my feelings. And I'm left with him acting more and more childish, and there's more distrust and distance between us, right? Like the wedge between us, and him kind of rebelling against me, which ultimately is obviously less intimacy, less connection, and less respect. But again, the results of it aren't great, right? But again, I want you to hear that the intention is benevolent. So if you're hearing this and you're like, oh man, I do some form of this mothery thing or this controlling thing or managing him thing, I just want you to understand it's so important to not be mad at yourself or ashamed for being someone who does try to control, does try to mother, or does try to get him to do the things the way you want or to be someone you want him to be. It's truly the only way you've understood how to try to be in charge of your own feelings, right? It's what you've been taught, and it's been passed down. This approach has been passed down to you from like all the people, right? For generation to generation. So it's not your fault. It's not some personal flaw that you might approach your husband this way sometimes. But again, it does not work well, right? It ultimately leads to an environment of distrust, right? Where he feels attacked and resentful, or he'll feel on edge around you, or he'll feel you don't admire him, right? He won't feel seen as capable through your eyes, the person he loves so much, right? And again, he might dig his heels in and resist more doing the things you want him to do, right? If he feels you're trying to control him, he might get defensive and walled off. He's likely to not be as interested in being around you or even being sexual with you, right? Especially if you're starting to feel more like a mom to him than a lover, right? That's not sexy. Another result of this attempted control is that your husband might not learn his own lessons or find his own way. In other words, he's less likely to grow up into the more mature partner you want him to be, right? And like my kitten, he isn't as likely to come to you lovingly, affectionately, just because he wants to, right? He's less likely to do it genuinely because he isn't being allowed fully to be who he is. And that doesn't feel so good to be around. And I do know that we women can often see how our partners, our husbands should do things. In other words, like what might be better or healthier or more efficient. Again, I think that's an innate natural skill that we women come wired with. particularly when in the realm of relationships. We truly may have a more healthy vision of ways to interact with like how a partner should interact with another, or like how to be a more mature adult and loving life partner. It's possible that it's true that you really know better than him in certain ways. But by exerting control, you will always lose out on closeness with this person you most want to be close to. Right? Again, when I'm motherly or bossy or controlly, my husband is reliably defensive and more distant and just weird. But when I'm a lover, when I'm in my own business and attending to myself, right? In other words, when I'm controlling myself and attending to my own happiness, my own emotional well-being, and therefore, I'm showing up with more lightness and playfulness and respect and trust and self-ownership. My husband almost always shows up with adoration, tenderness, respect, and playfulness himself. And really more interest in evolving into a better version of himself, in communicating more maturely and lovingly. I see this all the time with my clients when they stop the control, the mothery thing, the claws in him, right? And they let him be him. They respect him for him. He's oftentimes inspired to like go get someone to help him with his relationship stuff. I've had lots of partners decide they want to go have a therapist of their own, or to join their partner in coaching with me together or individually. We work that out. On a per case, per couple basis, or they start reading relationship books, or like my own husband started reading a communication book just of his own volition, right? These things happen all the time when we release control. So now that you can see that control causes oftentimes the opposite of what you're wanting in your marriage, it's just time to decide to approach it in a different way, a way that works way better. And that really starts with deciding who you want to be, deciding that you would prefer to be a lover and not a mother. Yeah? And of course, this can look however you want. And again, I'm not, when I say deciding to be a lover, I'm not specifically talking deciding to be like a sexual goddess, right? Like if that's not your jam. But really, I mean, the way of being, the way that you approach him as an equal, as someone who loves him and who's loved by him, right? Not as someone who needs to exert control in one way or another. Being a lover will always mean staying on your side of the street and not in his, right? Or in your business and not in your husband's business, right? It will mean not managing, not manipulating, but rather allowing him to be him, allowing him the freedom to be the adult that he is, not making him or insisting that he follow your rules, not trying to like manipulate his feelings in a positive direction. Sometimes like overpraising even can be a form of this, right? Or people pleasing, like I said earlier, and not trying to manipulate his feelings out of a negative direction or into a negative direction, right? Really like letting him handle his own feelings and have his own opinions that might differ from yours and have his own ways that might be different from yours. And ultimately respecting him and trusting him to have those feelings and opinions, right? Not efforting to get him to not have them or to become the ideal image of a husband that you have in your head, right? That image that's so dangerous. So to start, the work really for you is to step more into your own domain and let him rule his own domain. You rule yours, he rules his. And this metaphor is one that can be really useful for us here in this work. And it actually came from a client session. So imagine that your domain is this beautiful garden, right? And your husband's domain is this beautiful, kind of very different landscape, like a desert full of cool looking cactuses and, all the rocks and all the things that you might find in a very interesting looking desert. And yours is this lush garden. And imagine that there's this door between, like there's a wall that separates the garden from the desert, but there's this beautiful doorway in between that stays open, right? Your work is to hang out in your garden, right? And root out the weeds and plant new seeds and water the flowers and make it beautiful, right? Make it rich and a delightful place to be, right? And you let him hang out in his desert doing what he does with his interesting different landscape. And you invite him over, or he invites you over when you each want to, right? But you don't go gardening in each other's spaces. Yeah? You stay in your space. And this is obviously not the easiest thing to do, but the good news is, like I said earlier, you don't have to do this perfectly. If you go pull a weed in his garden by accident in his desert, it's forgivable. It's fine. I'm not perfect at this, and I have an amazing marriage. And you can too. You don't have to be perfect. But it is about choosing to be in your garden, choosing to focus on your domain and let him have his domain, right? Allow him to be who he is and do what he does without intervention, right? So you are a lover who is his equal, right? And again, the best way to do this is to pay more attention to yourself, to turn the focus back to you. Focus on your own life, your own passions, your own nervous system, right? On how you are showing up, right? On how you are thinking, on guiding your own feelings and taking your own step towards more emotional agency, right? Towards accepting the real human he is and the desert he lives in, right? Right? On loving him, being the partner you want to be, and melting any blocks to that. And again, this is going to mean a lot of noticing your own thoughts and beliefs and learning how to insource your own emotions and tend to your own feelings and fears and all the things. And it's going to mean choosing love on purpose. And this is all work that we do deeply when I work with my one-on-one clients. I have a whole step in my process that's dedicated to choosing and feeling love on purpose. It's beautiful work. And, if you want to dive a little bit more into this right away, I have just all of these things, right? Like focusing on you and doing all you can in your domain. Episode 44, it's called Being a Happy, Fulfilled Wife. That's a good one to listen to. That's kind of on this topic. All right. I do want to offer this note. This is important. When I'm talking about, staying in your domain and letting him be himself, right? Letting him be an adult, it never means not being proactive, right? Or being passive. The work that you do on you is actually the most active and effective route to creating what you want to experience in your marriage. Okay, it's very proactive work, and it's the way to make your marriage and even influence your partner in a really beautiful, loving direction. And another thing that's important to understand here is you can always communicate what's going on for you in a good, healthy way and make requests for what you want. Okay? So I'm not saying never ask for what you want. Ask for what you want. Absolutely. But there's a big difference between asking for what you want and trying to make him do it, right? Or demanding it. I talked sort of explicitly about this in episode 30. It's called 2 Highly Effective Ways to Ask for and Get What You Want. So that's a good one to listen to go further into this. And I also have a whole booklet. It's called The 7 Most Powerful Phrases to Deepen Connection. And I go into various approaches on this, communication tactics that can really help with all of this. So feel free to grab that. I have it in lots of different places over at my website, which is www.lifeisworthloving.com. If you don't already have that, definitely head over there and grab that. So to wrap this up, let's just be succinct here. Most of the despair and resentment and frustration and annoyance and ultimately the suffering in your marriage, in our marriages in these modern times, comes from trying to control what you simply cannot. Another adult human. Or if you do succeed at it temporarily, it comes with a great cost. Right? You might have a clean kitchen, but you will have way less respect, trust, and intimacy with the person you love. Right? It comes, this trying to exert control comes with a loss of lightness, with a sense that this marriage is a duty, that love is an obligation. And that doesn't tend to lead to both of you feeling like you've got an amazing lover, right? That rich place of genuine, deep acceptance and love that is the foundation of a thriving marriage, right? Instead, it will drive you and him far away from that place. And he's not likely ever to change because of pressure from you. He's much more likely to grow and evolve from that spaciousness of feeling safe to be him and loved for being him. So letting go of control is key. And it may be some of the hardest work you'll ever do on yourself if you go it on your own. But the most rewarding work ever. The next couple episodes will give you some specifics to help with that. But if you have a sense that deep, direct help doing this, making these changes will be really pivotal to you, as it has been for my clients, if you want to make the process so much easier and so much more enjoyable, and you want to make the most targeted changes inside of you and in your marriage that will make the most positive impact in your marriage and in your life, I invite you to come coach with me. It starts simply by setting up a consult where we'll talk and make a decision that's right for you about one-on-one coaching. The link to set up that consult is in the show notes, or you can just head over to my website, www.lifeisworthloving, and you'll see the work with me tab. Hit that and you'll be taken to the place where you can sign up for your consult. Here's the most beautiful thing about all of this. When you really can release the control, be his lover and not his mother, you'll likely be pleasantly surprised to see him begin to act less like a child and more like a man. I know I have been in my marriage. Be oh so well.